You all hanging in there?
We are.
Good.
Yeah. Thanks so much for your support. It's
Sure.
been difficult.
Yeah, it's tough.
Especially for chambers of commerce. Yep. Okay, we're live. Thank you all so much for joining us today for this very special webinar featuring our outstanding U.S. Senator John Cornyn and Tim Jeffcoat, SBA District Director. Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you, Tim, for being here. I know you've done so many of these, both of you, and we just appreciate your time. I'm Gina Spagnola. I'm the President and CEO of the Galveston Regional Chamber of Commerce, and I'm honored to co-host today's event with my good friend Jeff Sjostrom, the Executive Director, President of the Galveston Economic Development Partnership. Welcome, Jeff.
Afternoon, Gina.
Before he introduces our Senator, please note that this webinar is being recorded, posted, and shared. And after each of our speakers, we will have a little bit of time for some Q&A. So now I'll turn it over to you, Jeff.
Gina, thank you so much. And we are grateful to be joined by our senior U.S. Senator, John Cornyn. He has served Texas as a judge, as Attorney General, and now as our U.S. Senator. And he has earned a reputation as an articulate and powerful voice for Texans in Washington. I wanted to deviate a little bit from the standard. Senator Cornyn obviously has 42 pages of accolades and recognition. But what I'd like to do is just acknowledge a little bit of what Senator Cornyn has done for Galveston and for our region here in the last few years. Senator Cornyn is a leader that has supported and provided guidance to many of our key stakeholders in moving projects and initiatives forward. Just a couple of examples would include his staunch support for NASA and the Johnson Space Center. Senator Cornyn has advocated, led, and provided needed support to Texas A&M University at Galveston, in particular in the progress and the momentum for our national security multi-mission vessel. I know that Colonel Fossum, I believe, is on the call today, and his appreciation is significant for your efforts there, Senator. Likewise, Senator Cornyn has been a proactive supporter and leader for the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston. His support for the National Lab and other initiatives central to UTMB's national and international prominence cannot be overstated. Two agencies that I'd like to talk about in particular that have been critical for our recovery from past events and continue playing critical roles today. Obviously, the Small Business Administration with District Director Tim Jeffcoat and the Economic Development Administration. We're honored to have Tim Jeffcoat join us today. I don't even want to know what his calendar has been with webinars over the past 6 weeks. I know that it's up into probably triple-digit figures. But in my opinion, Tim Jeffcoat is the most proactive and engaged district director for any SBA office in this country.
Yes.
Likewise, with the Economic Development Administration, EDA is led by George Ayala out of the Austin Regional Office. EDA has invested through Senator Cornyn's leadership and support over $25 million directly into Galveston and over $70 million into our 3 adjoining counties over these past 10 years. EDA is someone who we're highly appreciative of, and we're grateful for your support, Senator Cornyn, and all the work and the resources that they provide, not only to us, but to our region and across the state. Finally, I would be remiss if I did not mention one of Senator Cornyn's greatest accomplishments, Jay Guerrero.
Yes.
Jay has developed an amazing relationship with constituents throughout Senator Cornyn's region, and in particular is a valued ally and a resource for all of us here at the local level. With that, Senator Cornyn, thank you so much for taking time to visit with us today, for your leadership and for your support and efforts geared toward making our region more resilient and stronger for the future. Welcome, Senator Cornyn. Would you like to make a few comments before we jump into some questions for you?
Thank you, Jeff. And I liked your introduction better than reading those 42 pages that you referred to. And tell our friends at A&M this year is their year.
Excellent.
That maritime vessel, I know that's been something we've been working on for a couple of years now, and it's really important. I know everybody lives in the Galveston area has, is an intrepid individual given the challenges that we face in natural disasters from time to time. And we've been through tough spots before, and certainly Galveston has proven itself to be resilient, and I'm happy to support you in any way I can. I was in Galveston during in January, February, and early March, just before the virus ramped up, and good Lord willing, I'll be back there to see you in person sometime soon. But today I wanted to tell you a little bit about the work that we've done in Congress to try to address this unprecedented pandemic. I say unprecedented, maybe 100 years ago, during the great influenza, would be the most recent comparison, but it's been very hard, I know, on a lot of people, a lot of businesses, and so we've tried to rise to the challenge with a response in Congress, and thankfully we've been able to do it largely on a bipartisan basis. If you'd told me 2 months ago, I would have voted for a $2.2 trillion bill, and it would have been unanimous in the Senate. I would not have believed it, but that's what Texans and what Americans do when we are challenged. We pull together. So obviously, this is both a public health challenge and a economic challenge. So to our folks on the front lines, or hospitals, or doctors and nurses, I mean, these are the real heroes because they're getting up and going to work today, every day, hopefully wearing the personal protective equipment we know that's been in short supply, but now is coming online in greater numbers. And our hospitals have deferred things like elective surgery, which have made it hard for them to meet their bottom line because they've wanted to keep beds open in case of a surge is needed for coronavirus patients in the ICU and on ventilators and things of that nature. So Congress has tried to respond appropriately. We've appropriated over the course of 2 bills, $175 billion. And that money is now en route. Much of it's already been received, which, as I've talked to hospital administrators around the state, that will help them fill that loss, that gap, and prevent them from having to furlough employees as a result of their budgetary problems. We also know that this is an unprecedented hardship on individuals who, through no fault of their own, have lost their job due to mitigation requirements to bend that curve, as we've heard. So to those who've lost their employment and need a financial lifeline, we've sent direct financial help to millions of Texans. An adult who makes up to $75,000 a year has gotten or will get as much as $1,200. A family of 4 with a household income of up to $150,000 can receive up to $3,400. So we need to give people some resources to help bridge this challenging gap that they are experiencing. We also have beefed up unemployment benefits, as you know, but the Texas Workforce Commission has been crushed with new applications. They are doing the best they can, and they are gradually processing more applications, but we've also expanded it to some independent contractors and nonprofits. I think Gina was sending me a signal there on some. Not all nonprofits were covered, but that's something we need to come back to and address. But we extended the duration of those benefits by another 13 weeks. We added another $600 federal benefit on top of the state's portion. And the good news, if there is good news, is that those benefits will be paid retroactive to the date the job is lost and not the date that the application is finally approved, although I know they are working on it as hard as they can. Now, I've been with Tim Jeffcoat on a number of these video conferences, and he's certainly the expert. But let me tell you, the Paycheck Protection Program, working with the SBA, has been an unmitigated success. You can imagine starting something this big and this fast. It hasn't been all necessarily smooth sailing the whole time, but it obviously was needed, and it's been enormously successful getting money to the employers that we targeted. The idea behind this is to provide a financial incentive to small businesses to keep connected to their employees so that when we come out of this crisis, they will be able to be part of that economic rebound. Both the small business and the employees that they have will then be able to go back to work. So Texas was the main beneficiary in the country from these PPP, this Paycheck Protection Program. Collectively, 135,000 loans have been made so far, more than any other state, for a total of $28.5 billion. But as you know, we ran out of money and had to be replenished. And so last Friday, I was at the White House when President Trump signed the next bill that replenished that fund with an additional $320 billion. So we'll keep monitoring this. I think this has helped, but one of the reasons why I wanted to have this call today is so you can continue to provide me and Tim and others of us, Jay Guerrero, the feedback that we need in order to tweak things that need tweaking, to fill gaps that need filling, and to see if there are other things we need to be doing. So one of the big parts of this bill that has not actually been implemented yet is something called the Main Street Lending Facility through the Treasury's Economic Stabilization Fund. We appropriated $500 billion. These numbers are staggering, for the Treasury through the Federal Reserve to lend out to credit-worthy borrowers. $46 billion was carved out primarily for the airline industry, recognizing their significance to our recovery and our economy and our national security. And the remaining $454 billion will go to provide loans for qualifying businesses in states and municipalities. This is, again, another way to try to provide some liquidity and an economic lifeline to those businesses. We put some restrictions on it that were negotiated. You can't use it for stock buybacks or salary increases for executives. I'm sure there are a number of folks in the call among the restaurants and retail business that are begin to gradually open their doors today. Maybe have curbside service, maybe delivery, takeout. But I know you're taking serious precautions to protect the safety of your workers and customers and are eager to get back to work. Finding the new normal is going to take a little while, but I'm confident we will get there. And one of the things that we will do, I'm confident, in this next piece of legislation is remove the deterrent of opportunistic lawsuits that might target employers if they follow guidelines and they gradually reopen, because this could be a real a deterrent to them wanting to reopen, not wanting to avoid that litigation. So this is going to be a part of the next tranche of legislation we pass. But as I said, your feedback is important to me. If you're not getting what you need, then please reach out to Jay, and we will run down the answer, get you a response. So thanks to all of you for organizing the call, and I'm happy to dodge a few questions, Gina.
Thank you so much. And I will say and echo Jeff's remarks, we appreciate you so much. And I will tell you, Jay Guerrero, you can catch him anytime. I don't think I've ever tried reaching out that he didn't answer that phone or you get that quick call back. So a great representation of you. And so thank you for that. I think Jeff has the first question for you.
You bet. And Senator, thank you so much. You talked about, and you're getting ready to go back to work next week in the Senate with going back into session. And there's been a lot of talk about a potential fourth package. In particular, we get a lot of questions here locally with regard to both infrastructure and then also potential aid for states and municipalities. You've been a big supporter of the coastal spine. You're familiar with the challenges that we have with the Pelican Island Bridge, the replacement of that bridge. I'm just curious if you had any comments with regard to either infrastructure, what your priorities are going to be, or some of the issues that are really being contested right now with aid back to states and municipalities.
Well, Jeff, as you know, we need an infrastructure bill. Our roads and bridges and need a refresher. And the challenge is not necessarily coming up with a reauthorization of the highway bill, but also how to pay for it. And that's the one thing that I would say we've been willing to take extraordinary measures and borrow money, basically increase the debt and deficit in order to meet this emergency. But my hope is that when it comes to infrastructure, we can find a responsible way to pay for it. And traditionally, that's been through a user fee and the gas tax. I don't think anybody wants to raise the gas tax, but I think we're looking at ways to try to provide, based on a user fee model, a way to fund that. And if that happens as a result of this, of the focus of trying to get Texans and Americans back to work, I'm all for it. We could do that separately from COVID-19, or we can do it as part of that process. You mentioned state and local jurisdictions, and we have appropriated $150 billion so far for that purpose. Texas got $11.2 billion, and cities and counties of 500,000 or more were able to apply directly. You know, there's always a struggle between Austin and locals when it comes to who does the money go to.
Mm-hmm.
And believe me, the governors always want to make sure it comes through Austin, and so does the state legislature by and large. But we were able to at least draw that line of 500,000 or more. All the rest of the money will be distributed through a formula, which essentially is going to be on a per capita basis to the smaller cities and counties. And so I think the $11.2 billion should help. But I know that sales tax revenue, which is our primary source of funding for our counties and cities in our state, they're way off, obviously, because of the shutdown. So we'll keep monitoring it. I think part of the debate that you're hearing in Washington has to do with whether the federal government should backstop bad decisions made in other states, let's say on their public employee pension problem, states like Illinois, California, and the like. I don't think, I certainly do not support using these emergency funds to backstop or reward bad behavior when it comes to those things. Yeah. Now, when it comes to COVID-19, I'm all in, and we'll do what we need to help our state and our counties and cities make this pay their bills, because we know they're the primary provider of police and other essential services, and we're going to help. We're going to be there.
Thank you, Senator. So right now, as you know, the 506s, 501c6s, we're not eligible currently.
Something told me you were going to bring that up.
You knew it. And I have to say that the other day when I woke up and saw your letter in support of that, it was a good day for me that I shared with the board. I wrote an article to the Daily News, and I said, it's like we're helping everybody. We, Chambers of Commerce, 4,000 or 5,000 of them across this nation, we're helping everybody get in the lifeboat, but we can't get in. This chamber, as you know, is 175 years, 175 years old, and we've helped bleed, for 175 years. And when it comes to this and with the hurricanes and stuff, chambers are left out, and it's really difficult for us. And I appreciate your support, but can you describe that? I think we've got 5 other presidents and CEOs from our county on with us today. So could you talk a little bit about any support, if any, that we might have?
Well, the same principle of the Paycheck Protection Program to allow you to stay connected with your employees and to help them through this crisis applies to chambers as applies generally to small business. So I certainly would support the chamber's eligibility. I think the concern was if we broadened it to all nonprofits, that we might find ourselves involved in some controversy over things that we didn't want to fight about, like
right.
Abortion and things like that.
Yes.
And so in order to keep it non-controversial, in order to get it done, we try to keep it narrow. But you have my commitment that we'll try to fix that mistake.
Thank you so much.
Senator, I think we're going to be rolling up against the clock here. So Unfortunately, we probably may be able to squeeze in this last question, and then I think we've got a hard stop for you.
Okay.
We were disappointed with Sarah Week being canceled this year. We have enjoyed that event and have always enjoyed seeing your participation and leadership at that event. The oil and gas industry has some really unprecedented things happening there. Could you give a little insight into what you're seeing in that industry and maybe what you see for the future?
Well, this has been something obviously that we've been paying a lot of attention to. Texas produces about 40% of the oil and gas for the nation, and it's exported all over the world. And this has been a wonderful, wonderful renaissance for American energy, and also made us less dependent on imported oil and gas from dangerous parts of the world where we know we've been embroiled in a lot of fights over the years. So this is it's pretty devastating. I know for the oil and gas industry right now, they've been hit by a double whammy. One was the coronavirus. With the lockdowns and the lack of economic activity, obviously there was less demand for the products. And but then the Saudis and the Russians decided to pile on and flood the world markets with their cheap oil. 15 senators, including me and Senator Cruz, wrote a letter to the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and said that we had been pretty reliable supporters of the U.S.-Saudi alliance, but that if Saudi Arabia was going to treat a friend this way, they could not depend on our support in the future. Well, amazing how quickly they responded. We got a conference call with the ambassador, and then the oil minister, and eventually, as you know now, starting today, I think those cuts, the 10 million barrel cutback kicks in. But the biggest problem, Jeff, is just the fact that with the slowdown in economic activity, we have about a 20 to 25 million barrel surplus in world production. And actually, one of the biggest problems now is there's nowhere to store it. And so we're looking for everything from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which will be filled, to alternative sites to store some of this oil, while we hopefully begin to open the door to demand, which will eventually be the answer, I think, to getting the industry back on its feet. But in the meantime, you know, it's been devastating to the people who work in that sector. We've also been working with Secretary Mnuchin and Secretary Brulette to try to come up with a way that energy companies can access that Main Street lending facility that I talked about a moment ago. They haven't stood it up yet. They haven't issued the guidance, but I know this is something that President Trump cares about. He's committed to, and at least I've been to the White House twice in the last 3 weeks. Both of the times, by the way, if you're going to be in the cabinet room with the president, you got to get tested for coronavirus. And actually, what they do is before you get on the White House campus, you got to get a temperature test behind both your ears and your forehead. Then they send you to the medical unit, swab your nose, do a quick test, and if you're negative, then they let you go to the cabinet room, but they test you again for your temperature before you walk in. But we had one of those meetings specifically on the crisis in the energy sector. And I'm convinced that the president fully supports our efforts to do whatever is necessary to get the industry back on its feet.
How are we on time? Do we need to move on? Cinder, I know you've got something else that you've got to rush off to, correct?
Well, thank you, Gina, and Jeff, and everybody.
Thank you so much for all you're doing. If we can help you in any way, please let us know.
Oh, well, the offer is mutual, and please reach out to me or Jay or the team, and I'll leave you in Tim's good hands.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Senator.
All right, Tim, welcome, and thank you for taking time to be with us today. We really appreciate the great work of the SBA and your leadership. And with that said, Jeff, anything to add? I know before we turn over to Tim? Good?
No, I think with Tim, you know, he's just, I can't.
He's everywhere.
tell you how active he has been and how much we appreciate it. He will self-admit that he doesn't always have the answers, but his accessibility
Yes.
over these last 6 to 8 weeks has been remarkable. I had the pleasure of being on a webinar earlier today with Tim. And maybe, Tim, just share a little bit in terms of just your processing flow and the way that things are going and the volumes that you all have been working under over this time.
Okay. Well, so far as the SBA as a whole, everybody knows about the first round of PPP that got expended. And in this second round, I just have numbers through the end of the day. Wednesday, and now we're almost at the end of the day, Friday. So I'm at least a solid day late. But it was around 1 million loans, around $100 billion at the end of the day, Wednesday. And I'll tell you why I think those numbers are significant. You know, the funding was $310 billion for PPP. But when we went into this second round, the SBA made deliberate decisions to slow down how the loans flowed through our systems. So for everybody's edification, the banks do all of the work. They use their own forms, they use their own processes, and they get the loan to the point where they're happy with it. Then what they do is they enter it into an SBA system to get it a final approval. It's very fast, just takes a few seconds. The very big banks can just inject those in there with automatic systems, and the very small banks have to type them in by hand. So we slowed down the pace at which those could be entered. Finally, we told the big banks they can't use their automatic systems anymore. And we even set a time window aside, which was very late at night, but we set aside a time when just the very small banks could enter their loans, such as Hometown Bank right there out on the island. And the results are great. Small banks, the smallest banks, have done 61% of the volume on this second round of PPP. So there's a lot going on. I don't know where we stand right now on the amount of PPP that has been dispersed, or rather committed through this second round of funding. But it looks to me, from what I'm seeing at the moment, that it's going to last through the weekend, possibly even the first day or two of next week before that $310 billion is consumed. So if you are someone on this call that thinks you want to get a payroll protection program loan and you have not done it, I urge you to contact the bank now and go ahead and get your application in there and try to get approved as fast as possible. We normally have about 150 or so lenders in the Houston district that are actively engaged in government guaranteed lending. Now with PPP, it's nearly 500 lenders. So there are a huge number of lenders. I consider that to be huge. Nationwide, there are a little over 5,000 that are doing it. The economic injury disaster loans is something else that we really should talk about. The PPP loan and the EIDL loan, they both have their place. So if you have a PPP loan, you'll know that that funds predominantly payroll for 8 weeks. It also can cover your rent, mortgage interest, and utilities, but that's all. The EIDL loan, which is directly from the SBA, that can fund you for every facet of your business. So all of your operating costs that are impaired, your ability to pay them is now impaired because your revenues are reduced. You may use the EIDL to mitigate all of that. That EIDL also ran out of money. It was refunded by $60 billion for new, EIDL loans and $10 billion for new EIDL advance amounts. And those are the part that turns into a grant. Those are up to $10,000 and they're calculated $1,000 per employee. Right this second, you cannot apply for the EIDL. The portal for it is closed, but it will reopen, and I believe it will reopen soon. I don't know exactly when, but stay tuned. That is going to reopen. So the EIDL will cover all of the costs that a PPP will not cover. So the two loans may be what you need to get you through the next few months as our economy returns and as things get better. Just here in Texas, about 100,000 of those EIDL advances have already been issued, and that was as of a week ago. I actually don't have numbers newer than that. You're probably thinking, Tim, what's wrong with the SBA? How come you don't have current numbers? The answer is every possible person that can work on getting money out the door is working on getting money out the door to small business, and we're updating databases when we get time to do it. So those, even though I would like the data right this second, I'm last on the totem pole for getting that data because we're really focused on getting the money out the door. And Jeff, you mentioned the work that we're doing here in my office. It's been about 200 webinars since we started with COVID relief. We started on March 16th in my office. That's been at least 30,000 direct viewers and participants in those webinars. And if you count the replays of recordings, it's well over 100,000 folks that we've been able to touch. And we're very pleased with that. That's not being boastful. That's just a good metric for us to know that we're helping. We're able to reach some people and get them what they need to know. What we will be doing next week with our webinar schedule, we just concluded this meeting a little while ago. Twice a day, nope, that's not true. Once a day, we will be doing public webinars about these programs, PPP and EIDL. And we're doing those at 3 in the afternoon. At 9 o'clock in the morning every day, we will be doing a new webinar that we just started this week, which is how to get your PPP loan forgiven. So we go over all of the relevant guidance on how you get as much forgiveness as possible on that loan. My sincere desire is whatever your PPP loan was, I would like you to not have to repay it.
Sure.
Instead, I would like the SBA to pay that loan for you. So that's what we're doing in those. So those are 9 o'clock every morning. At 1:30 every day, we're teaching our lenders about forgiveness. So that's a webinar only for lenders. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we do webinars also in Spanish at 11 o'clock. Next week at 11 will be about the lending programs. And next Thursday at 11 will be in Spanish about forgiveness. We also do quite a few other kinds of webinars, and we'll do even more as we go forward, such as we've just yesterday, I think it was, did a webinar with the IRS about some really wonderful new legislation to help your business this year. I think, and I'm working from memory here, I don't work for the IRS, so I might not get this 100% correct, but I think it said that 30% of your payroll this year, you can get a credit for that on next year's taxes. Now, I'm sure there are conditions you have to meet, et cetera.
Sure.
But those webinars could have immense value to you. We're also looking at starting a webinar with a local legal expert that can help you understand what to do when you want to recall employees from unemployment and they don't want to come back, and a variety of issues like that. So we're trying to do as many value-added webinars as we can. We do have a new platform that will accommodate up to 10,000 people at a time. So we are eager to start using that. We actually began using it today, and we think we know how to use it. So we're going to start next week with the forgiveness webinar.
10,000. Tim,
Yeah.
the information you have been sending is like, it's lifeblood to our members. I know Jeff and Michelle share it. We share it, send it on social media, but we've had so many compliments, and it comes back to us, but it's really you. We give credit to you because you've really faced and answered so many questions and allowed people to attend, because there's so much information coming at all of us.
And
you've
it's also
done
new.
an incredible job. And always our staff, there's someone on our staff that's really attending almost all of those, as many as we
good.
can. So thank you so much. It's never too much. It's always just right. And there's always somebody out there that didn't get to make a Wednesday that can make it. And so thank you. It's made our work a lot easier too.
Well, thank you.
Having
Thank
that
you.
information.
Yeah, when we did our first forgiveness webinar, we had 3,200 people sign up, but we could only accommodate 500. So that's when we said, okay, we got to do something different. That's not going to work. So we'll use this other tool to accommodate 10,000 at a time if necessary.
That's good to know. Wow. What platform is that?
It's called Teams Live.
Teams Live.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and we all have it on our computers, and just until today, we really didn't know how to use it. But we sure did practice with it, and I think we've got it down cold, and it's actually a very good little platform. So we will be using that for a lot of our webinars going forward. So I think that's it in a nutshell. We are here to help. We want your businesses to thrive. If I can give any advice to anybody, number one, if you want a PPP loan, get your application in immediately. Stop what you're doing. As soon as this webinar is over, get it done. There are lots of lenders in the area that will take you if you are not a current customer, and they will be delighted to help you with your PPP loan. On my website, which is sba.gov/tx/Houston, you can find a list of lenders, And that list of lenders will show you which ones will take brand new customers. So you can go find that lender right now if your lender won't do that for you.
And I think we have that list too, because you forwarded that to us. So thank you.
And it changes from time to time. It probably needs to be updated right now, but
And Tim,
but
talk
it's
about,
essentially accurate.
sorry, talk
That's okay.
about just for a second. I know we're getting ready to end this, but talk about the importance of having all your information intact and the guidelines so that when you go to the bank, to the lender, that you've got all the information, because people that do are finding that they get that money quickly. And so talk about that.
Yeah, if you're going to apply for a PPP loan, what you want to have at your fingertips, well, you're not going to go see anybody. So going with your application to the lender, you need to have adequate documentation so that the lender can double check your numbers and make sure that your estimate of what you need for payroll is completely correct. And we are asking them to do that. That's a requirement of the SBA. So some people will send both their payroll registers and their 941s and maybe a spreadsheet where they showed how they calculated what their average payroll was and what their average headcount is. I would encourage you to be that as detailed as possible. They need that. If you submit an application and that's not clear, the odds are good, as much as going on, that they won't be able to contact you to get clarification until this money has been expended. So absolutely get it straight. If you feel like you're not sure it's right, then I would recommend you call the Texas Gulf Coast Small Business Development Center. They are a partner of the SBA. You've got a wonderful office just right across the bridge over, well, it's not Texas City, is it? But it's near there.
Mm-hmm.
And they would be delighted to help you, and they can help you get that organized. But yeah, you want that to be absolutely crystal clear. Look at it this way. When you submit your application to the bank for a PPP, you want enough clear documentation that it's easy for them to say yes. Once they say yes, they turn around to the SBA, and in just a matter of seconds, we give them a loan number and they're ready to go. If they can't say yes, then they can't do it. If you're going to pursue an EIDL loan, there's only 3 numbers you need to do that. You need last year's revenues and last year's operating costs, and then last year's headcount. That's all you need. The other information is what you already know. Who are you? Who owns your business? How to get in touch with you? That kind of thing.
Yeah, Tim, I think that's a great, and a segue with regard to, with what Mr. Ballman and Amy Reed do through our Galveston County Small Business Development Center. They're actually in the League City Chamber building, and they provide great resources. I think you and I have talked a number of times just about disaster preparedness and recovery, and you're familiar with our community bank loan.
Right.
Our 3 primary community lenders, just so you know, up before Monday, pre-Monday, they had processed almost 1,500 loans for over $230 million. That represented almost 25,000 jobs. And what I heard from them this week is that they may have doubled their loan numbers as of Wednesday, but they were noticing that the average of the loan amounts were smaller than the first tranche. And so we're waiting to kind of compile those numbers, but then we've got Frost Bank and other lenders who have really come to the table to help. And so it's really encouraging to see our banks positioned to really be on that front line for business recovery. The other thing I want to mention just shortly is, you've provided resources to us from a business preparedness perspective. And over the course of the last year, you've introduced us to people like NextSeed and Lift Fund and the Minority Business Development Agency. And these are companies, as we start to transition from the disaster itself and as our businesses start to reopen, there's going to be a need for additional resources.
Yeah.
And I just can't be more appreciative with what the boys over at NextSeed have done with the community bridge notes, what Lift Fund is doing with their micro loan programs, and even through the MBDA, the work that they're doing for women and minority-owned businesses in terms of procurement and emerging technology. This is part of our toolbox that you've been instrumental in helping us to forge. And I think as Gina and I look at the next stages of not only this event, but the reality that we're probably now 5 to 6 weeks out of what we are all believing is going to be a very non-active storm season. But the reality is we're going to be working with our businesses to make sure, especially in this vulnerable position, that we continue to keep the toolbox full so that we can be in a position to help these businesses. So I just want to say thank you for being there for a wide array of services and activities.
Jeff, it's just my pleasure. I'm delighted to help.
Great job, Fran. I hope you get that cruise that got
It'll happen.
You need to extend that cruise time. You need
Gina, I'm wondering if Tim's in an office or if he's in a ship.
I don't
No,
know.
no, I'm
it
in my
kind of
office.
looks like
Almost like
that
he's
you
in a
may
ship
be on the
already.
cruise. It does kind of look like a cruise. Well, Jeff, I know we're right at our time, but I was going to say I'm not seeing any questions in the chat box. And do you think we've addressed everything, Tim? Anything out there? Closing pieces of advice, maybe let them know again where you are and how to reach you.
Yep. You know, you would think I would know my office phone number.
That's okay. We'll get it to them. No worries.
Okay. Yeah. I actually do know what it is, but the most important thing really, if you need any of the information we have, is to hit the SBA Houston website.
Yeah.
There you're going to find a copy of that forgiveness presentation. You'll find a copy of the presentation we used to teach you about the EIDL and PPP loans. There's a copy of the webinar schedule and how to get connected to each one of those. And there's that lender list. And in the bottom right-hand corner, I would argue it's the most important thing on the web page. Click that, give us your email address, and then every time we do anything, we inform you about it. And again, that's www.sba.gov/tx/Houston. Or you can just Google SBA Houston, should be the first hit.
Or you can go to the Galveston Economic Development Partnerships website or the Chamber's website, and we have every single thing that you're doing on there and links on how to get to you. Jay, I believe is still on. Anything else, Jeff? We left anything? Jay, thank you so much for helping us. There you are, friend. How we doing?
That's great.
Leave anything out? Anything that we left out we didn't get to answer or ask some of the questions I know that were really important on there for the senator.
Having Tim on and having the boss on, they covered a lot of ground. It was very informative. So thank y'all for doing
We're
it.
so appreciative for his time. I know he's got a busy day every day, and we thank you, friend. Tim, thank you. Jeff, thanks so much. Thanks to everyone for listening. It's Facebook Live. If you have any additional questions, get them to us, get them to Tim. We'll do our best. We'll get you answers. Thank you
very
all.
much.
Yes,
Bye-bye.
thank you. Thanks, Jay.